Welcome to this explainer, everyone. Today we're tracing the absolutely explosive AI developments of May 2026. We're going to start from the microscopic silicon level and go all the way up to global defense. Seriously, we're looking at a week of news that perfectly captures how raw computing power is physically reshaping our economy, our devices, and even our global security. So let's just dive right in and explore exactly how this is happening. Okay, think about this massive number for a second. $900 billion. Anthropic is on the verge of closing a funding round that would push its valuation to exactly that astonishing figure. I mean, the sheer scale of that is wild. With an annual revenue run rate that's now blowing past $30 billion, this leap makes Anthropic the most valuable private AI company in the world. Eclipsing OpenAI in valuation isn't just, a financial milestone. It signals a massive shift in market dominance and overall investor confidence in Anthropic's underlying models. But, and there's always a catch, this astronomical, totally unprecedented growth is creating an equally massive physical problem. To understand how a single startup's hardware bottleneck ripples through the entire global economy, here is our roadmap for today. First, the $900 billion bottleneck. 2, Fractile's silicon solution. 3, radical new infrastructure. 4, the era of AI agents. And finally, society, ethics, and defense. All right, let's get into section 1, the $900 billion bottleneck. So the crucial point here is that Anthropic's profit margins are taking a heavy hit because of inference costs. Inference is basically the computing phase where a trained AI model actually generates responses, and it requires massive, repetitive processing power and data movement. Think of it kind of like this. Training the AI is like a student spending years reading textbooks and studying for a medical degree, right? That's a huge upfront cost. But inference, that's the doctor actually seeing patients every single day, diagnosing them and writing prescriptions. It requires constantly shuttling data back and forth between the processor and the memory to answer millions of user prompts in real time. For a company handling thousands of enterprise clients all at once, that constant data movement gets wildly expensive and creates a severe, literal hardware bottleneck. To handle all that processing, Anthropic currently relies on 3 main chip suppliers. We're talking Nvidia, Google, and Amazon. They rent this capacity to avoid being locked into just one vendor, which makes total sense. But relying on the current market standard leaves them without true leverage in pricing negotiations. If Nvidia sets a price, well, Anthropic essentially just has to pay it, and that eats directly into their margins. So to regain that pricing leverage, drive down overhead, and solve this massive efficiency problem, they are actively hunting for a 4th supplier. They desperately need a hardware breakthrough to maintain profitability as they scale up. Which brings us to section 2, Fractile's silicon solution. What's really fascinating here is the clear contrast between traditional, bottleneck-prone DRAM and Fractile's highly efficient SRAM memory compute fusion. See, standard AI chips use DRAM, meaning they have to physically move data to a separate off-chip memory bank to process it. It's exactly like a master chef constantly having to sprint to a grocery store across the street every single time they need an ingredient. Fractile, a London-based startup founded back in 2022, is building an SRAM architecture that fuses memory and compute together, storing the data directly next to the transistors that are actually doing the math. Now it's like the ingredients are right there on the cutting board, completely eliminating that transit time. Because of this wild new architecture, Fractile is making some truly massive claims. They're stating their chips can deliver inference 25 times faster. On top of that, they operate at 1/10 the cost of traditional GPUs. I mean, just think about what that means for a company's bottom line. Achieving 25 times the speed at a fraction of the cost could completely upend the AI hardware market. So even though they're targeting commercial readiness by 2027, the potential to obliterate inference costs is exactly why Anthropic is already sitting at the negotiating table. Okay, moving right along to section 3, radical new infrastructure. Now, as these new chips race toward production, we hit a major physical real-world bottleneck. Right now, the U.S. is short roughly 439,000 construction workers. With up to 40% of AI data center construction sites already facing delays due to the severe labor shortage, you really have to ask, how exactly are tech giants going to build the massive physical infrastructure needed to house all this new silicon? Well, the solutions literally sound like science fiction. Look at the robotic builders SoftBank is developing under a new company called Razi. They're aiming for a $100 billion IPO using autonomous robots to literally build U.S. data centers from the ground up, completely bypassing the human labor shortage. And if that isn't crazy enough, StarCloud is bypassing Earth entirely. They are partnering with SpaceX to launch orbital space data centers,
physically sending Nvidia chips into the cold vacuum of space to solve terrestrial energy and cooling limitations. The industry is pushing the absolute boundaries of what is physically possible to fuel this growth.
That naturally leads us into Section 4, the era of AI agents. Because all of that massive infrastructure is powering a totally new way of interacting with the web. Stripe has just unveiled issuing for agents through its Link wallet, and the workflow is fascinating. Basically, first, your AI agent creates a spend request because it decides it needs to buy something on your behalf. Second, you, the user, approve it via a quick mobile notification. And finally, a one-time payment credential is shared securely with the agent so it can autonomously complete the transaction. We're rapidly moving away from humans scrolling and clicking buy to AI agents actually negotiating and executing transactions for us.
Taking this a step further, OpenAI is reportedly developing a 2028 smartphone featuring custom processors where AI agents completely replace traditional apps, but utilizing real-time environmental context. Just imagine a phone with absolutely no app grid. Instead of opening a weather app, then a maps app, then a calendar app, the custom processors are constantly capturing your location and environmental reality. You just ask your phone to handle your commute, and a single, unified agent books the train, pushes back your first meeting, and orders your coffee based on the fact that it's raining outside. The whole concept of discrete apps disappears entirely, replaced by continuous contextual assistance.
And if you're sitting there wondering if these models are actually smart enough to handle high-stakes, real-world tasks, just consider this triage diagnostic accuracy data. A landmark Harvard Medical School study tested OpenAI's O1 model against human ER doctors. When given the exact same unprocessed medical records, the human doctors hit 55% accuracy. But the OpenAI model, it jumped all the way to 67% accuracy. Outperforming seasoned emergency room physicians in initial diagnostics proves for sure that these underlying models are becoming astonishingly capable, incredibly fast.
Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Society, Ethics, and Defense. At the absolute highest level of research right now, developers are trying to build systems that completely surpass our own knowledge constraints. DeepMind's David Silver just raised a record $1.1 billion seed round for Ineffable Intelligence. And their goal? To build AI that discovers knowledge without relying on human data. See, right now, AI learns by reading practically everything humans have ever written, which means it inherits our errors, our blind spots, and all our limitations. Building a system that bypasses human-generated data entirely is basically the holy grail of AI research, because it allows the intelligence to discover entirely new math, physics, and science completely on its own. But as you might expect, as this non-human intelligence rapidly rises, society is pushing back hard. We discussed earlier how this silicon to society shift is reshaping our devices and commerce, but now it's actually forcing cultural institutions to react defensively. The 99th Academy Awards just instituted sweeping eligibility rules. They enacted a formal ban on AI-generated performances, a formal ban on AI-generated screenplays, and they are now requiring a mandatory affidavit of human origin for producers. It's a very stark, hard line drawn right in the sand to protect human artistry from this rapidly accelerating technology.
The absolute most consequential lines being drawn, however, are in national defense. The Pentagon recently signed major classified AI deals. Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, and others are approved vendors, with the stated goal to streamline data and augment warfighter decisions. But here's the kicker. Anthropic is the excluded vendor here, because Anthropic insisted on strict ethical guardrails to prevent their AI from being used for autonomous weapons. The Department of Defense officially labeled them a supply chain risk, which is a term usually reserved for foreign adversaries. We are seeing a direct, real-world collision between military integration and corporate boundary setting.
And this military integration definitely isn't happening quietly. Inside these companies, intense friction is building over these exact boundaries. Andreas Kirsch, a senior DeepMind research scientist, publicly stated, "I'm speechless at Google signing a deal to use our AI models for classified tasks. Frankly, it is shameful." This represents a massive ideological divide happening right out in the open between the researchers actually building the technology and the executives deploying it into global defense systems. As we wrap up this explainer, we've journeyed from microscopic chip architectures that could save billions to robots building data centers to AI diagnosing patients, right up to the highest levels of global defense. The technology is breaking through literally every physical and software bottleneck in its path. But looking at the ideological clash between defense needs and corporate guardrails, we really have to pause and consider a critical question. As hardware bottlenecks break and AI infrastructure scales to the stars, what is the ultimate trade-off between limitless AI scaling and strict ethical boundaries? Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning what's on the horizon.